Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. Spring is officially here, so that's exciting. Hopefully, the weather here where I am in the Northeast starts to get warmer consistently. We had a couple nice days, and hopefully that nice weather kind of just stays consistent, and we're heading towards that direction and the pandemic, and just hopefully things are starting to get better there, too. So definitely some optimism here for everybody, I think, that we can all say. So that's exciting. I am pleased to announce that I have a really special guest with me, joining me on this episode, Mike Reiss from ESPN. How are you doing today?
Gabby, I'm doing great. I totally agree with you on the weather, and also the longer days. It was about 6 o'clock the other day, and we have a 12-year-old and a soon-to-be 9-year-old here at home. And I was like, I had to get my 9-year-old out of the house. And I was like, let's go kick the ball over at the school, and it was 6 o'clock. And I had said to him and his two buddies, I said, isn't it great that it's 6 o'clock, it's light outside, and it's like 65 degrees? It makes such a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I was sitting outside doing my work, and I was like, this is incredible. Like, this is the weather I've been waiting for, and it's nice to see people outside walking around and everything like that.
Totally. And the Patriots are spending big money, rebuilding their team. So things are starting to turn around. We're getting more vaccinations. People are hopefully, staying healthy. Like maybe there's light at the end of the tunnel here.
Yeah, I think there is. And I'm excited to see it. And I'm hoping by this summer, we can all kind of feel a little more normalcy when the nice weather is here and everybody wants to get together for barbecues and things like that.
Definitely. What will be the first thing you'll do? I've already decided I need to go to a concert. Like I miss seeing live music. So I think that might be the first thing on my list. How about for you?
Yeah, it's definitely between either that or flying somewhere nice and going to a nice vacation location, because I haven't gotten to do that in a long time either. So it's definitely those two things. Also, actually, though, going to a sporting event is up there too. Like I love going to baseball games in the summer. So that'll be a nice thing to be able to do this year too.
Definitely. I was watching the Bruins last night. It was the first, so this would have been Thursday night, and it was the first time they allowed fans, even though they were only not as much as you would normally have, but it was like so different to see fans, at a game. So I love seeing the Bruins scored with 2 minutes left after blowing a lead to tie the game, and they show fans in the stands, and it's like, okay, yes, that's what it's supposed to look like back to that normalcy in a way.
Exactly, yeah, and just being able to hear the crowd cheering and everything like that, I was like, yeah, this is a representation to me of things actually moving in the right direction.
Totally agree.
So that's super exciting. I hope that that continues, and we can just continue to move forward past all of this, and that things start to just, open back up, and we can all kind of live our lives safely again and be able to get together with people and everything like that, and just continue to stay positive.
Definitely. I like your Patriots jersey, by the way.
Thank you.
I actually like the older jersey better. What do you think about the new jersey?
I with you, I think the old jerseys I kind of like better, but I actually kind of like this. I mean, It fits well, and I kind of like the design, but the old jerseys, I don't think you can beat those.
Any name on the back, or are you going nameless?
It's a Cam Newton jersey.
Oh, you went full Cam. Did you do that before, right after he signed, or during the season? Because those were flying off the shelves, right? It was a week 3 game, and I remember being on TV being like, I had a Brady jersey and a Newton jersey. I'm like, look, this jersey's going to get retired, pointing to the Brady jersey. And I was like, but this one, I got to tell you, is flying off the shelves. And then he got COVID, and it sort of went downhill. But it's great to see that you're still repping him and supporting him. I mean, we could talk about that. Is he going to be able to have a better season? Such a huge story for the Patriots because they've definitely improved the things around him, right?
Yeah, I actually got this jersey as a Christmas present this past year from my aunt because she asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I said a Patriots jersey, And I had said Cam specifically, but then everybody was like, that's kind of risky because we don't know if Cam's going to end up staying in New England. And I was like, I know, but it's, I can show my support. And if he doesn't end up staying, at least it's just another jersey to add to my collection.
And I will tell you, Gabby, it was interesting on Cam. So I had a perception of Cam prior to him coming to New England. I had just very limited dealings with him when he was in Carolina. And I can't say like they were great. But so I had sort of a perception, like, how would he fit with what the Patriots do? And he got here and like, man, what a team first, like try to bring people together guy, like humbled. He was very humbled and he was actually a lot of fun to cover. He had nicknames for all the players. And so it was a reminder to me, like, don't always judge someone, that you don't know that well, like until you cover them on a day-to-day basis, you probably don't really know what they're all about. So I have to say, covering Cam last year was, even though his performance, I think he would even acknowledge, wasn't at the level that he hoped it would be. And there were a lot of reasons for that. But, he was sort of a fun guy to cover. And I really look forward to like 2021 to see what it's like to cover him on a day-to-day basis with better tight ends, better receivers around him. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was definitely something that I wanted to get your input on too, because I know a lot of people were really low on Cam after this past season. And, I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt because there were a lot of circumstances there, like you said, like him getting COVID, and it's hard to bounce back from that. He also never really got a full off season to really train with the Patriots and learn the system. So that was another factor. And also the fact that he didn't really have a lot of weapons around him. All of that should be taken into consideration. I do think that with more weapons this year, hopefully he'll be more successful, but it's also really hard to know if he lost a lot of what he had and that we're going to see the same Cam this year, even though it seems like they're trying to set him up to succeed more.
Well, I literally don't think I could have said it any better than you did, because you named the three things that I would have highlighted: no offseason, getting COVID, lack of weapons around him, right? And so those are the three things. And then there were some times where receivers were open, Gabby, and he would just throw the ball at their feet or just be inaccurate. And so you are sort of had this lingering question of, okay, like, well, we have those three factors that you perfectly laid out. Like Cam also, there's some of this falls on Cam, but how much? And we're going to find out the answer in 2021. It's part of what makes it so compelling and why we'll watch. Can Cam turn back the clock and with an off season, with no COVID and with better weapons, do we see a Cam that looks completely different than we saw last year? And what a great story that would be if it is, right? Because, listen to the players. Like, they love Cam. They love being around him. Infectious personality, leadership. Like, they want to see it happen for him. At the same time, we know that Father Time catches up with people at different times. Cam has been beaten up a little bit, injury-wise. Like, maybe he doesn't have it anymore, right? So that's why we'll be watching, because it will be compelling to see how it all turns out.
Yeah, and I think it's just it's a situation where people feel weird because on one hand, everybody's like, oh, this could be great. He has so many weapons now. Like, he could really do a lot. But what you said before that you indicated about his accuracy not being the best either when he had people wide open and he couldn't hit them, that's also concerning too, because that to me is more of Cam just digressing. And I'm happy that it's only a 1-year deal that they committed to, and they're not spending a ton of money on him. And a lot of what he's going to get paid depends on how well they play. And I like that. And I'm happy that they didn't spend more money on it than they did, and they didn't commit to a longer term deal. Because to me, that seems like maybe they are going to draft a quarterback and he's going to be a bridge for whoever comes up until that person kind of can develop and learn the system. Cam's going to be the guy until they bring that person in.
So I think that's pretty spot on, Gabby. I would say that, they bring Cam back because they were looking at their other options in free agency. and they weren't crazy about him. So we're talking about names like Andy Dalton. We're talking about names like Tyrod Taylor. Like they looking around and they're saying, like, the free agent class, like, we're better off with Cam at this level of contract to try to build off what we started last year. Trade options, Marcus Mariota, like they look into that, and his contract was a lot richer than what Cam signed for. So that sort of, leads them away from him. Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco, like, I think they would love to have Jimmy back, but like San Francisco is not going to give him to you, so at what price do you want to do that?
Jimmy.
Of course, right? I mean, I think he would probably be their best option, right? To represent right now and the future, because they really felt strongly about him when he was here, and you would have been banking on him to stay healthy. So now they get Cam and they say, whether it's Cam or maybe Jarrett Stidham pushes him and we see a different Jarrett Stidham in 2021, like, let's leave that possibility open. They say we can go in and play games right now while we still look for our quarterback of the future. And that's exactly where I sort of see the Patriots right now at that position.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I think there were a lot of options out there that they just weren't as interested in. And I know that this was something that was talked about, I think, before, was an interest in Matthew Stafford before he got signed and that big trade happened. And I know that the Patriots had expressed some interest in him, but I do think that he's being overpaid right now. And I would have been disappointed if the Patriots spent that much money on another quarterback who's pretty injury prone and who knows how much longer he's going to be around either.
Yeah, and I think on that, Gabby, like, the timing's important. Like, that deal happened, a while back, and I think we're in the situation the Patriots are in. Like, they need to explore all their options, and I never got the sense that they were like all in on Matthew Stafford. Like, oh, we got to go get him. Like, I think they did their due diligence is probably the best way to describe it. And they reach out and they see what the market looks like for Matthew Stafford, both in terms of the compensation to acquire him and the salary that you would have to pay him. Same thing with Carson Wentz. Just look into it, like, oh, this is what they're looking for. This is what the contract would be. And then you try to make the best decision based on the information that you get back, when you explore those. But I never really got the sense like that was their guy, Gabby. Like, I think they felt like the guy they ended up with, Cam, was their best option based on the available quarterbacks in free agency relative to what you'd have to pay him, if you want to get into the trade possibilities too.
Yeah, and it's somebody that knows the system now, as opposed to bringing in another veteran quarterback who doesn't know the Patriots system and would have to learn it when they already have somebody that they can bring back that knows the system when they're already working on the rebuild. So that kind of saves some of the effort from that perspective too, is that now that Cam has a season under his belt with the Patriots and he can come back and he knows more what to expect than he did last year.
It's a really good point. Did you happen to watch Cam on that I Am Athlete podcast with Brandon Marshall, Fred Taylor, and Chad Ochocinco? Because he was actually really good talking about that. Yeah, it was good, Gabby. I check it out. He talked about that, where he was like, this offense is 20 years in the making. And, he's trying to figure it all out, right, on the fly. And now that he has that foundation, Cam feels like he'll be more in tune with what they do and how they evolve over the course of a season.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. So there's more optimism this season going into it than there was, I think, when the season ended. I think people now are more starting to realize that this has the potential to be a pretty good team this year with the weapons that they brought in. And, I think as soon as free agency started, I didn't expect a lot of it to happen in one day, but I did expect them to make some of those moves. And I also am excited to see what they do in the draft, because it's crazy that they made all these moves already and they haven't even drafted yet.
I agree. And so I would say in the draft, like, the first question is quarterback of the future. Like, if you see someone that you like and you believe he can be the quarterback of the future, you go, right? You go get that player. But more likely that won't happen because you're picking at 15 as if you're the Patriots, and usually the best quarterbacks are long gone before 15, and the price to move up into the top 5 is probably going to be prohibitive. So that puts the Patriots in the position where they can pick the best players for them. And that's, if you look at their history of when they've had their best drafts, it's probably when they feel like they're not married to a specific position. Like 2010, they had a great draft with Devin McCourty and Rob Gronkowski. Like, they need one of those drafts, right? And it doesn't matter what position. Like, maybe it's a top cornerback, right? Like, even though you have Stephon Gilmore and J.C. Jackson, like, can never hurt to get a top young cornerback who might be the next Stephon Gilmore, right? Or a top receiver to keep adding to what you've already built. But I think what they've done is replenish a roster that had sort of been depleted from a talent perspective to give them a lot of flexibility in the draft.
Yeah, and something I will say kind of along those lines that people need to think about too is that they ultimately ended up going 7-9 last season. And considering all of the circumstances and the fact that they came pretty close to having a winning record last year is actually kind of remarkable if you think about it, just with all of the circumstances that they went through and the COVID opt-outs and just all the changes happening and a new quarterback coming into the system, losing Tom Brady, everything like that. I think the season overall that had the potential to be a lot worse considering all of the circumstances actually did not end terribly. And I think that's something that we can take into consideration going into next year, is that there's not really a way to be worse than they were. And they were almost at 500.
Yeah. And I sort of look at this one both ways, Gabby. Like I say, like 7-9, like a couple of those plays early in the season go a different way. Like Cam bounces it outside in Seattle in week 2. And we're talking about 8-8, 9-7, right? Like, and they're not as bad as maybe it looked at times. So I see it from that perspective. But then I see it from another perspective, and I'm like, 7-9 with that roster, like maybe that should have been 4-12, but because of their coaching and the way they get the most out of their players, they're able to squeeze out wins that other teams wouldn't be able to squeeze out. And so I sort of balance that thought out a little bit. And I say, I don't know how much stock to put into 2020. I think what I'm going to do is what Bill Belichick often talks about that he does. He just wipes the slate clean and says 2021 is a completely different year. Nothing that happened last year really matters. Like, let's build from this point going forward and assess just what we have right now.
Yeah, and I like that he has that mentality too. Like, let's not dwell on what happened last season. Let's just move on and focus on this year and what can we as a 2021 Patriots team do to compete and contend with other teams, especially in the division, because the other teams in the division are getting better too. So that's another factor to play into this also, is that you have the Bills who are going to be good again. And even the Dolphins, I mean, you know, their quarterback situation is a little questionable because Tua didn't have the season that they were hoping that he would have. So who knows what's going to happen with them, but they have the potential to still be really good too. So this is going to be a season again where just the division itself is going to be tough.
It'll be fun too to see the Bills and how they respond to being the hunted. Because for the better part of the last 2 decades, everyone was chasing the Patriots, right?
Yeah.
And so that'll be fun to see how they respond. And I think they'll respond accordingly. Like, it seems like they have some good things going out there in Buffalo, but like, it's hard to get back. You know, I've seen that with the Patriots. So it's hard to win the division and get back to where you were the year before. So I'm curious on that. Miami, I agree with you. My questions are with Tua and if they pick the right quarterback, because Justin Herbert looked pretty good from what we saw last year, who was picked 1 pick after him. Yeah. We got the Jets with the new head coach in Robert Saleh, and they're just sort of building their foundation. So they're probably a couple years away from where they envision they would like to be, but it'll be interesting to see if they can play the Patriots tough. So the division is tougher, and I'm going to widen it out, Gabby. Like, fascinated with the Buccaneers and our old buddy Tom Brady, because the last team to repeat as Super Bowl champions is the Patriots in 2003, 2004, when Tom was the quarterback. So if anyone knows how to do it and wipe the slate clean and start all over again, it's that guy. So that'll be fun to watch too.
Yeah, it will be fun to see if they can bounce back and be that same Bucs team that comes back and can win again, because that'd be pretty crazy and ironic that it's Tom Brady once again doing it this much time later after he repeated with the Patriots. And that's another thing that Patriots fans aren't used to from our perspective, is we've been so spoiled for 20 seasons having Tom Brady as our quarterback and pairing him with Bill Belichick, and it's just been 20 years of greatness. So we're not used to feeling this way and feeling like it's so frustrating missing the playoffs, and every other football fan has experienced this. It's just we have not, because we're not used to this for so long because of how good the Patriots have been. So we had this one season where they weren't a playoff team, and all of a sudden everybody just doesn't know how to feel about it or what to think, because that's just not something that we're used to. But I think they're headed in the right direction, and a lot of these signings, I think, indicate that they're heading in the right direction, and Belichick is aware of where the weaknesses were, and he's trying to address those now.
Yeah, that's really well said. And Gabby, I would say part of that's generational, right? Like not knowing how to respond. I think if you talk to maybe some fans that, let's say, are 35 and older, they will tell you about hard, lean years. You know, like I started covering the Patriots in 1997 when Pete Carroll was the coach. And, you know, like they were about 500, a little bit better than 500 in those years. That wouldn't be as acceptable to the current generation, right? That since the year 2001 has really only known one thing, and that's unprecedented success. Go back a little further, you know, to fans in the early 90s when a 2-14 season in 1990, 91, 92, that range, led them to the number one pick in the draft in 1993 when Drew Bledsoe was a quarterback. So it's all perspective. How long have you followed the team, And I think for the older crowd, like the idea of one-off year is like, yeah, we'll take one off year if that's all it is, like, because we can tell you about a lot of off years, like decades of off years, right? And so understanding that history and realizing that the level that the Patriots and Bill Belichick have raised the bar to is just so uncommon, right? It creates really an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I mean, it's true that it's if you were born into the Tom Brady era and you just grew up around watching the success every single year, then it's now we're at the point where you're just feeling what any other normal football fan would feel. And even so, it's 1 year. I mean, look at Jets fans and just how many years they haven't been successful. And I can't even imagine that as a Patriots fan right now, growing up watching Tom Brady and all the success that he had with this team. And just when he initially left to go to the Bucs, I was so heartbroken because I truly thought that he was going to retire a Patriot. I just did not think I could ever picture him in another uniform playing for another team.
I totally understand it. And I think to me, it's one of the tough parts about sports. Like there's certain players that I feel that you want them to be one jersey players. The only vision you ever have of that player is in one jersey, right? And so I think if we were to make decisions, or if Bill Belichick were to make decisions by his heart, like that would happen, right? But there's other factors that get into play, and you hear people say it is a business, right? And that's the tough part, but I think the business side of it ultimately led to that result, which I think is still hard, Gabby, for a lot of fans, to see. I think they're very happy for Tom for giving them 2 decades of just an amazing ride. But it's not easy seeing him raise that Lombardi trophy in another uniform.
Yeah, it wasn't, because I kept thinking this could have been the Patriots if he was still here.
Naturally so. That's only natural.
Well, do you feel like this, based on the season they had last year and the lack of weapons, do you feel like they could have been a playoff team if they had that exact same team and all the exact same factors with the COVID opt-outs and everything else, but they had Brady as the quarterback instead of Cam?
So I think it probably would have looked similar to 2019 when they lost in that wild card round in the playoffs to the Titans. Like, they weren't set up as a championship team, but I believe Tom is the type of guy that can raise the level of the others around him to an area that they didn't think was possible, right? Now, there's a lot more, Gabby, that goes into it. Like, what would Tom's mindset and comportment been like in that situation? Like, looking back, now that I think of 2019 in retrospect, he was frustrated. He wanted better pieces around him, right? So, it's a little revisionist history to think that he would be here in 2020 with those same pieces or what they had around him, and that he would all of a sudden feel differently than that, right?
Yeah.
But I never bet against Tom. Like, that's what I learned over 2 decades. Like, just, you say he can't, like, I'll say he can. That's why I picked the Bucks in the Super Bowl. At ESPN, I think we had 75% of the people pick the Chiefs. Like, I was like first in line to pick Brady and the Buccaneers. I'm like, you don't bet against Tom. I learned this so many times over 2 decades. Tom Brady is about one of the safest bets in all of sports.
Even their entire playoff run, people didn't want to bet on them either. And I was like, I know all too well that you can never bet against Tom Brady, especially in big games, like playoff games like this. I said, I've seen too much of this happen, and I could never, ever not pick him in the Super Bowl. I just can't do it. And especially with the Chiefs, who had won the year before, and we know how hard it is to repeat. I said, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs get this done. Now, granted, I didn't think the score was going to turn out like that. I thought it was going to be a lot closer of a game. But I still didn't think that the Chiefs were going to repeat. And that's another thing that's interesting about the Super Bowl, I think, too, is a lot of people are going to be watching Kansas City this year because now we know that they're a beatable team and there's a way to shut down that offense. Because for a while, there were a lot of questions like, is there even a way to shut down KC? But now we know that there is. So I think a lot of other teams now in the AFC are going to be able to contend with Kansas City more. And I don't think it's going to be the AFC this year. I mean, you can kind of speak on this too, but I don't think the AFC is just going to be the Chiefs on top and then everybody else this year. I think there's going to be teams closer to them.
So for Kansas City, I think we saw the impact of the offensive line that that had on them in the Super Bowl. They go out and sign Joe Thuney of the Patriots, and they adding other pieces on the line. So I think that will definitely help them, Gabby. I would say, like, it's a great example of how hard it is to repeat, right? Like, you get back to the point to possibly win another Super Bowl, you fall short. Now you're back with everyone else, right? So it is going to be hard for them. I still think I would put them as the top contender in the AFC, but I do like Buffalo. I know we talked about them. Like, I think they have to be in the mix. Curious to see what happens with Cleveland. I thought they were a very impressive team last year, so I like them. I think the AFC South, to me, could be coming back a little bit. Like, the Titans look like they've took some hits. I want to see what happens with the Colts and their, quarterback situation. The Texans with Deshaun, who knows what's going to happen there. So I'm not sure I see a team there in that division that really, makes me go, whoa. And then the West, the West, I think, is the Chiefs. I don't see, to me, the Raiders, the Broncos, Chargers. I think the Patriots are sort of like in that second tier there where, like, if they turn it on, anything's possible here. Anything's possible.
Yeah, and that's the fun thing about football, though, too, is anything is possible at any time. But what do you think are going to be kind of the biggest keys for the Patriots this year to be able to be in contention? I mean, not necessarily win their division but be one of those teams that's really in the conversation for a wild card, a playoff spot, and really get a chance to see the playoffs this upcoming season? What are going to be the most important factors you think for them?
Well, Gabby, I wouldn't overcomplicate it. Like, I think it starts at quarterback, right? I mean, it's the most important position on the field, and they've made a lot of moves at these other positions to try to make it easier for the quarterback, who, by all indications, it's going to be Cam Newton right now, based on what we know. So to me, start there and then look at the other areas where, they struggled. Like, they need to play the run better on defense. They should be able to do that. They have better players now. But so if I had to pick two areas, quarterback, play better on run defense, and those are two good places to start.
Yeah, and they've done a lot of work on the defensive side this free agency already too. I mean, they've signed some big players to the defense too, and they're going to have people coming back defensively that I think is going to make a difference as well. People that didn't play last season. So I think I was frustrated with the defense last year because it was very inconsistent and it was just tough to watch this defense. But I do think that based on what they've done so far, I think the defense is going to be better this year.
Definitely agree. And I would say just before they even signed any free agents, having Dante Hightower return from an opt-out year in 2020 sort of got them off to a good start in that area before they, went out and got Matt Judon at outside linebacker, brought back Kyle Van Noy at linebacker, Lawrence Guy at defensive tackle, Henry Anderson at defensive end, Devon Godchow at nose tackle. Like, their front seven is going to be tough and physical. And it almost reminds me a little bit of their early era Super Bowl championship teams with names like Richard Seymour and Vince Wilfork and Ty Warren and Brian Cox and Willie McGinnis and Mike Vrabel and Teddy Bruschi. Like, those were Roosevelt Colvin. Those were good, tough, hard-nosed, physical, high-end players. So the potential's there for some good stuff for the Patriots.
Yeah, and I mean, even the tight ends, they signed arguably the two best tight ends in the free agent class this year. And we know that the tight end position really needed work.
Definitely. They paid a lot of money, and Hunter Henry has to stay healthy. That's the biggest concern with him. Some injury history there going back to his time in college. But if they're healthy, it really should transform what they're able to do on offense. Like, just the ability to dictate matchups with the defense. Like, here are our two tight ends. We can pound it at you with the running game, or we can spread you out and throw it. How are you, as a defense, going to react to that? I think Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator, is generally at his best when he has that at his disposal. And then it's going to be up to Cam, Gabby, just like we talked about. Like, if they do spread him out, can he make those throws consistently?
Yeah, this is going to be a real test year for Cam, because this is when it's really going to be able, we're all going to really be able to see if he still has it or not, because there's not really the excuses anymore of not having the weapons around him, because now they are setting him up for that success. So if he still is looking like he played last season, then we'll know that Cam was a lot of the issue that they had last year. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to kind of prove all the doubters wrong and say, look, I still have it. I can do this. I just needed the help.
A lot of pressure on Cam. He welcomes the pressure. He posted something on social media the other day that said, it's the only way I would want it. And so to me, Gabby, it fires me up, because this is why we follow sports. It's going to be compelling to see how it turns out.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, I think it's going to be one of those years where, they might not make a Super Bowl run because they, who knows how everything's going to work out with all these players. But I do think that talent-wise and the way that their roster is looking right now, I think that they're set up to at least be a wild card team as long as people stay healthy and as long as Cam can, even be decent and improve his accuracy. We're not looking for the Cam that was an MVP, 2015 Cam. Nobody's expecting that. I think people are expecting the Cam that at least can be some version of that and show some glimpses of that Cam Newton back then when he was just really putting up these really good numbers. And I think if he can do some of that, then they're going to be much better off.
Yeah, and you know what, Gabby? I would say don't lower the bar too much on the Patriots. Like, I'm not saying I look at them and say they're a Super Bowl favorite, but I always ask the question, if not them, then who? Who would you pick to be a Super Bowl favorite? Obviously Tampa, right? Coming out of the NFC. I think Kansas City, we talked about. Buffalo is going to be tough. Like those three teams probably stand out to me as the teams that you look at and say that they probably have the best chance right now based on what they've done the way they're constituted. But if I've learned anything covering the league over the years, like you never know. And the Patriots, what Bill has done, Bill Belichick, I feel like he's strengthened the roster in like spots, 5 to like 35, and like maybe they don't have spots 1 through 4, at the level of the couple of the teams I just mentioned, but they're going to be a stronger team across the board. And if they can build it, like the first Super Bowl they ever won, 2001, we never would have thought the Patriots would win that Super Bowl, but they were the best team that year and when it mattered the most. And they are constructed now to go on that, to potentially have that type of situation if it goes like they hope it would go. But it takes a lot of work to get there. Like, you don't just snap your fingers. Like, I think Tom had even said that when he was on one of those late night shows. He said it almost got draining to him in New England because people just expected, they'll be back in the Super Bowl. Like, it's hard to put it together, So I would say don't lower the bar and say just wild card. Obviously there's a lot of work to be done, but like anything's possible. Really, anything's possible.
Yeah, and in the playoffs, it isn't necessarily a lot of times about what happened during the regular season. If a team clicks at the exact right time, they could make a playoff run and be that team that kind of gets there. And even with Cleveland, they happened to run into Kansas City, but even that was still a close game for them. And if they had beaten Kansas City, who knows what would have happened. And when you think of Cleveland from this past year, we knew that they were a good team, but nobody, I don't think, would have thought that they made the run that they did in the playoffs, especially with the teams that they ran into. So you really never know if a team can click at the right time, they could be that team that gets there. And when the season starts, if Cam can kind of keep it together and work with these players that they have now, this talent, they actually could be a very good team, I think.
And health is such a big part of it too. Like we see how injuries play a big factor. So a lot of times the depth you have will be important to see how you can fill in for the injuries that you have.
Yeah. And I'm also, I'm just curious how much longer Belichick's even going to be there. And I feel like this is part of the reason why I felt like a rookie quarterback wasn't going to be his first option, because I don't think he would want to stick around for a full rebuild, because we don't know how much longer he's going to be coaching, and I feel like he'd rather try to win another championship before retiring than try to focus on a full rebuild and maybe start a rebuild and then leave it up to whoever takes over for him to finish that rebuild.
He turned 69 in April, and I think that's just a number to him, just from having listened to him talk. I don't see any end in sight for him right now, but I would say the urgency to win is as high as it's ever been.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see that, though, because, I haven't seen anything saying that he's even close to thinking about leaving, but it's one of those situations where I guess you never know if at any point that could happen. As long as Brady's still playing, Belichick's still going to be coaching, I think. The two of them are just going to be doing it forever, I feel like, is the joke I like to make.
There you go. As long as the Patriots have success, right? We've seen things change in the league. They were 7-9 last year, and if they have another down year, a down year after that, maybe it gets to the point where both sides feel like we've run our course, and it's time to try something different. I'd be shocked if that happens. Doesn't seem possible to me, but I think, like I said, in the league, NFL, we've seen things change fast, so we have to be at least aware of the possibility that could happen too.
Yeah, that's going to be strange too when he retires and the Patriots are dealing with a new coach and GM situation too, because that's something that for a while people haven't had to get used to either. So it's going to be interesting to see how things happen with him as well, and just kind of with the Patriots longer term future. But I'm excited and optimistic about the upcoming season. I think that it's going to end up being a better season than last year was, and I think Cam is really fired up now and just ready to have a better year. And it's a good sign that the players were all excited that they brought him back. And I think that's a good sign too, because if they have a good relationship with their quarterback, I think that definitely helps with their success and everything too. So I think that they're going to come into this season like ready to go and just ready to tackle it after the season they had last year.
That's a good point too, just on how the players really, were favoring Cam coming back. I think Devin McCourty was the first that I saw that was like, would love to see him come back, maybe have a good, a fair off season, to get into it. So they seem to respond well to Cam.
Yeah, they do for sure. And I think Patriots fans have a lot of reason to be optimistic and just excited for the season and hope that things go better than they did last year.
Definitely.
With the inconsistency and everything. But yeah, so just quickly before I let you go, because I know people are going to be, wondering this too, can you just kind of give us a brief overview of just how you got involved with working in sports and covering the Patriots?
Sure. So I grew up in Framingham, Massachusetts, and I always wanted to be an athlete, but that soon became clear that would not be continuing beyond high school. So my father, who was a sportscaster, Gabby, said, why don't you go down to the local newspaper and see if they need some help? You can go write about sports, and still be around it, even though you wouldn't be playing. And so that's how I got started. I did that in high school, through college at University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And I sent out about 200 resumes when I was in college, hoping to work at a newspaper. And I got 200 rejections. No one had a job. The only job that was open, and I only found out through a friend of my brother's, was with the Patriots at their team newspaper and website. And so that was my first full-time job. And I just fell in love with it from the first day. Great people over there at the Patriots. Fred Kirsch was my first boss. He's still there. Amazing man. And I've been doing it ever since. And I feel really fortunate, privileged, and lucky to have started there and to just stick with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's crazy to see people's stories sometimes and just kind of how they got into it, because everyone's stories are different and just the way that they get into it. And I mean, I'm so passionate about working in sports too. So it's something that I hope to just continue to do and continue to work my way up and just keep taking different avenues to expand my skills. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I even started my podcast in the first place, was just to keep growing my skills and just, be able to share a lot of experiences and talk about things going on in the Boston sports world.
It's really cool, Gabby. And I would just say, if you have passion for something, like that can take you very, very far.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And I'm definitely going to take that with me as I continue navigating through my career in the sports industry, because there's nothing I would rather be doing. And I love sports and I love working in it. So I'm really grateful that I've already even gotten the experience working in sports and just being in the industry.
It's awesome. And I wish you definitely the best of luck, sticking with it and going forward. And, like Bill Belichick says, if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like you worked a day. Right. And it seems like you're on your path.
Yeah, I always think about that too. And I think it's awesome. And I'm just going to keep working hard at it and maybe one day be doing what you're doing now.
Awesome. That would be awesome.
Yeah. But again, I really appreciate you joining me today. This was great. And I hope the Patriots have a really good season. I'm really looking forward to it. I miss football already and looking forward to it coming back. And I hope that you and your family stay safe and that everything works out with the pandemic and with the warm weather coming, and just a lot of optimism. And so I wish you the best of luck. And again, I appreciate you joining Boston Balling. Everybody, as always, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate everyone's support for the show and just the constant growth and audience development, and couldn't do it without anybody. So I appreciate it. You all know where to find Boston Balling. It's on all podcast streaming platforms, on social media. So you can find it that way, and be sure to tune in next time and look forward to talking to everybody again. So hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. Have a good one.